Today, it's going to be a great day in the Lord, great day of worship, great day of NFL, watching the Chiefs defeat the 49ers. It's going to be great. Eric and I and our team get to go hang out a couple days in Leavenworth. Every part of today is going to be just amazing. We're even going to talk about money again today. See, the whole day, just totally amazing. So interesting that on our currency, on the back side of each bill, near the very top, is our motto, "In God we trust." Now, too often we have the political debate around that. That's not the conversation today. Here's the conversation today, is that how valuable it is to have this discipleship reminder for us. In one of the greatest pieces of power, because the reality is money is powerful. You can do a lot with it. And some of our biggest choices involve money. Some of our biggest regrets revolve around choices we made with money. And well, one of the best, life lessons is just really practical is, well, what comes naturally is, as one of my favorite financial mentors taught us, that money can often kind of, go wherever it wants, and money can tell you what to do, or you can tell your money what to do. And the process of budgeting and communicating with your spouse and learning to manage your money is making a plan so that this power that you hold in your hands, whether you have a lot of it or you're just frustrated because you just have a little bit of it, that as much as you have, you get the right to tell it where to go. But it'll try to tell you where it wants to go, and society will try to tell you how you should spend it. But it's just such a great reminder that every time we see it, that there is this reminder that is a good discipleship reminder. In God, well, why don't we just personalize it? In God I trust. Or do I? When it comes to the money that has been entrusted to me. In fact, maybe something better even than to tell my money where to go is to invite the God of the universe to tell me to tell my money where it should go. Now that's being a disciple of Jesus, right? But here's the big question I want us to ask today. If I claim, "In God I trust," then how I use every dollar entrusted to me will confirm or deny whether I really trust God or myself. And yes, it often does come down to giving. Giving and generosity, every time that our hearts are tugged with a cause that we really believe in, and we say, "I should give, I want to support that," but then we don't. And what's the deal with this gap between our genuine desire, even what we claim to believe, and what we value, but then we just can't quite make it happen? What is happening there with the gap? I'm going to propose to you today that if we're honest, that there's a little conversation that happens very quickly in our minds, a story that we tell ourselves that we're pretty good at telling ourselves, that usually goes something like this: but what if I don't have enough? I have all these other financial obligations. I need to feed my family, pay my mortgage. I need to. And so this is one more. Well, maybe this need tugging at my heart is just a want to compared to the need to, because I might not have enough. Last week, we were taught from Jesus with a really crazy story that Jesus told about a man who had more than enough. And he looked at the folks in the crowd who had more than enough, and he said, "I want you to learn from this gentleman who had more than enough, and don't make the mistakes that he made, but enjoy the blessing of generosity." This week, in the next section, he's going to look at all the rest of us who don't really think that we have more than enough, although living in the strongest economy that's ever lived on the face of the earth, we all have more than enough, way more than others. But whatever, just hang in here today. That if you've ever told yourself you might not have enough, Jesus is like, well, I've got a discipleship message for you as well, and I want to set you free from that story of scarcity, from that story of poverty, from that story of not having enough and the stress that comes along with that. I want to teach you as well and set you free. So Jesus continues on. Luke chapter 12 is where we are at today, and I'm just going to read the whole section and then teach through it a bit. Luke chapter 12, starting in verse 22, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, 'Therefore I tell you, Do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds. Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? And since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Consider how the wildflowers grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it. For the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. So sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that'll never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Here's what I want you to hear today. What I believe is the core that Jesus is going to try to teach and get our attention here today is this: that the God who directs me to give is the same Father who provides and meets my needs. And if we really buy into that, if we really believe that, and if we tell ourselves stories in line with this truth, that the God who directs me to give is the same Father who's already been providing all of my needs and meeting all my needs, if I really tell myself that story, it'll help to close the gap so that we become generous, and then to experience the benefits after that. Part of the challenge here is that there is a 2,000-year gap. There's a cultural gap. There's an economic gap between what Jesus is the crowd that he is teaching and our own experience. The folks Jesus is saying this to are day laborers who work hard with their hands, and at the end of their day, they get a day's wages, which will buy food and bread and feed their family that day. And then tomorrow they're going to get up and go to work again and work for one day's wages and feed their family that day. And they will do this day after day after day after day, probably for the rest of their lives. And at the end of their lives, hoping and praying that their children or their children's children or a family friend, someone will help to take care of them when they are unable to work anymore and earn their daily bread. You're like, but shouldn't they be saving? Shouldn't they? Long time ago, different kind of an economy, hard days late work for daily bread. Now remember, anybody who had the ability to save for more and to invest and who had more than they needed for that day, God spoke to them last week. And so this is what Jesus is saying, this radical language of give, sell your possessions, give to the poor, and a whole bunch of them were pretty poor. And so to help kind of understand where we fall in the story and how it relates to us, I kind of thought, okay, how do we get at this for ourselves? And you know what I thought about it? We do the same thing, and if we were to think of our life in terms of kind of financial life stages, that as we progress through life and as we interact with money in different ways throughout our lifespan. And so for a common kind of person that kind of grows up, gets the career, has kids, and kind of works, if that's the kind of the common storyline through life, here's maybe some financial life stages, and then you can kind of see where you fit and see if this helps describe your life. But stage number one might be when we're a student and we get that first job and we start to earn some money, and the primary purpose of the money that you get from the first job is to buy it. Whatever it is, you want to buy it. And you're like, I worked, I got some money, and now I need to buy it. Or I saved up a little bit and now I get to buy it. And we just consume, and you work and you get money, and your interaction with money is just so that you can buy it. But then you kind of progress into young adulthood, and into young adulthood, the financial stage of life is build it. because you're building your life. And so you buy that house, but then you make the first mortgage payment and realize that you paid way more towards the interest and a tiny little bit towards the principal, and you're like, it doesn't really feel like I'm buying this house. This is gonna take me forever. But it's okay. I got lots of years, and I'm building my life, and I'm building my future, and so I make a lot of sacrifices, and I go to school, and I invest in my future because I am building my life, and we interact with money as we are builders. And then we get into the parenthood stage of life, and our interaction with money is to pay for it, right? And it is diapers and formula. And then, just the other day, I was celebrating with a young dad who's like, we're out of diapers. Yes, we're out of the diaper stage. Like, life just gets so much. You're like, wow, we're saving so much money now that we're out of the formula and diapers. But then pretty soon comes around like baseball bats, soccer cleats, whatever else it might be. And it's just always, and now Eric and I, we get to live in that phase of life. We're still kind of the parenthood pay for it with college bills. Holy cow. Like, totally had to redo the budget and tighten down a lot of things so that we can make that payment every month because we're in the pay for it. And so it changes, but the verb here is still the same. Pay, pay, pay. And then there's the empty nest, right? And at that phase of life, it's accumulated. Because retirement is on the horizon. I want to be able to retire, and I want to retire comfortably. And so it is time to accumulate and save and invest towards the future and save for retirement and accumulate as much as possible so that we get to the last phase of life, which is retirement, in our financial life stages. And in retirement, it's make it last. Is it any wonder why people generally become a little bit more conservative as they grow older? Because just the life stage says, I've got to take whatever I have and make it last, which is the definition of conserving. And so make it last. How much are we going to spend to make sure that we can make it last? And here's where this relates to giving and generosity. Because in every stage, we tend to say this, right? Like, oh, my expenses are really, my life stage right now. I could say this, oh, expenses are really high, we're paying for college, and so I really want to be able to give generously to the church and other needs. And Compassion 360, they had like a record number of people come through this week, and they need extra food, but I got to feed my own family. I'm paying for so many things. As soon as I get to that empty nest stage, all of a sudden, I'll have so much money, then I can be generous. And all the empty nesters laughed hysterically. Right? Or these financial life stages, it's easy to like look back and say, oh, if I'd only known how much extra money I had that I thought I did, that I didn't think I have. Here's what I've discovered. Number one, each stage provides plenty to worry about. Each stage will have financial concerns, financial worries. And at every stage, you will quite easily find good reason to tell yourself the story that you might not have enough. You don't have enough. What if I don't have enough? And to live, it'll be really easy in every stage to live with fear and worry about not having enough. Each stage provides plenty to worry about, and each stage provides plenty of distractions to run after. And Jesus, being the Son of God, knowing how we are, knowing the thoughts we think, the fears that hold us back, the worries that just run through our mind, he teaches us right here. Look at how he starts out, verse 22. Then Jesus said to his disciples, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you wear. Now, at first, and you read this, he actually uses the word worry several times. It's kind of the theme. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. And sometimes it's like, I don't know that that's actually helpful, right? Because honestly, you're like, well, how dare you insult the Bible? Just I'm not insulting the Bible, but we read the Bible and we listen, and I've heard people just who say, man, I struggle with worry, so if I worry, is it a sin because Jesus says, don't worry? And I don't know that Jesus is trying to like heap guilt on us for sinning here, but he's trying to help us. Because when Jesus says, don't worry, it's not like, when he says, it's not like when you try to say to your kids, oh, just calm down, right? We say it to our kids because we say it to our spouse once, and then we never do it again. Or if we do it twice, and then we surely never do it again. right? But then we think, well, it didn't work on my spouse. Maybe it'll work on my kids. Oh, just calm down, right? This feels a lot like, oh, just calm down. But Jesus, he says, don't worry. And I'm going to tell you why you don't have to worry. And I'm going to tell you how to stop the endless worry. And that is, tell yourself a better story. That the worry story of I might not have enough, I might not have enough, I might not have enough. And so therefore the solution is I need to be secure financially first. And then I can give. And Jesus says, here's why you don't need to worry. And I put the wrong verse in there. I am sorry. So we're going to have the wrong verse on the slide, so I'm just going to have to read it for you. Verse 24. Jesus says, consider the ravens. They do not sow. They do not reap. They do not have a storeroom or barn, and yet God feeds them. What's interesting is, in Jesus' time, ravens were looked down upon. Ravens were despised. Like, they were the dirty birds that nobody liked. They're just like, ooh, the ravens. Nobody likes the ravens. And Jesus is like, let's take those ravens that everybody complains about and hates. Even your Father in heaven. They don't plant their crops, water their crops, wait for the crops, reap the crops, store them in barns. They just go out every day and they find their food. Why? Because your Father in heaven feeds them. And Jesus gives them a powerful image that they've seen every day of their lives, but they've never thought about it, because Jesus says, let me just kind of like, you see the ravens, right? And the ravens, they're animals. They don't really, I actually don't believe animals have, like a consciousness or God consciousness. We could debate that. It's a whole other separate thing, right? But they're just out there looking for their food. But he's like, if you just kind of pull the curtain back, I want you to see behind the scenes what your invisible God is doing. Because here's the question, right? We're like, how can I trust an invisible God to take care of me? That's essentially the core question. He's like, let me tell you why you can trust an invisible God. Because we're going to pull back the curtain here, and I want you to see the invisible God who is working behind the scenes to feed the ravens. And you're like, that doesn't make sense. That might be more the story you're telling yourself. But Jesus, the Son of God, said, the reason you don't have to worry, and the story you can tell yourself, is every time you see that bird flying, picking, pecking, feeding itself. Like, birds are really smart, you know that? Sometimes you come in the church sometime, you may try this sometime, and you come in here and you sit in here and you pray, and you're like, what is going up on the roof? It sounds like something is up on the roof. You know what they do? So like the birds, I don't know if they're ravens or crows, because I never can keep the two of them straight, right? But there's like a walnut tree over in one of the neighbors. And so the birds will, let's just say it's the ravens, okay? Since Jesus is using the example here. They go and they pick up the walnuts. They fly up to the top of the church. They stand on the very edge, and then they let go of the walnut. And the walnut rolls down the roof. Boop, pops off the gutter, lands on the blacktop. They pick it up. They go do it again 2 or 3 times. From that, it cracks open, and they get their food. And I'm like, how smart is that? Wow, they're so resourceful. So yes, they have to like do a little bit of work, but they're not, Jesus is like, they're not worrying about it. They're not building barns. They're not sowing, reaping. They're just going out, getting every day, because and then they don't even realize there's a God in heaven taking care of them. And he's like, now that you know, you have a Father in heaven who's taking care of you. And he gives us an image of a father who provides, because that's what good fathers do. And you know what good fathers do? Good fathers not only provide what their kids need, but every now and then, good fathers, they love to provide what their kids want. And there's extra little surprises, extra blessings that the kids never saw coming, because that's what good fathers do. I remember a couple of times, so growing up, and my mom and dad, My dad was a blue-collar worker and worked really, really hard, and they wanted my mom to be able to stay home, and so they just created a lifestyle that we didn't have a lot, but we always had everything that we needed. But they worked really hard for one income to be able to provide for our family. And we had a good childhood, but we definitely did not get everything we wanted. I would even say we rarely got the things that we wanted because they were working really hard to be able to give and to be able to save and to be able to provide all of our needs with the limited income that they had. And I remember one day we went to the employee picnic, and they were giving away prizes to the families and everybody. And there was a game, and one of the prizes in the game was like a real leather football. And I wanted it so bad. I didn't win the game. I got the consolation prize of a board game. I'm like, how boring is that, right? I was not very grateful, you know. My dad saw that. And guess what he brought home the next day? The ball. I didn't deserve it. I didn't need it. He just saw his son and wanted to bless his kid because that's what a good dad does. Remember very clearly the day Dad came home from work and brought a swimming pool home. We're like, wow, this is wonderful. And we filled it up. It was great. Until the 4th of July when he blew it up with an M80, but you know, that's all right. He replaced it, brought another one home to bless us with it, and provided for a good family fun. And then there was the time, totally out of the blue, Mom and Dad were whispering kind of weird, like the morning we kind of went to school, and then Dad came home that night, and he brought home a big box that contained the Dukes of Hazzard Big Wheel. Yeah, this one right here. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I mean, this was like, you know, if you're a kid of the 80s, when you got the big wheel. Anybody else have the big wheel? Okay, a few of us. Grant had the big wheel. Tammy had the big wheel. Javier even had yeah, when you got the big wheel, like, that was the real deal, and especially the Dukes of Hazzard General Lee big wheel with the streamers hanging off the end and with the rear handbrake, right? So you could really, like, skid through the driveway. Oh, man, we had so much. Now, we didn't get one for each, my sister and I. We had to share it, right? Because there wasn't a lot, but like we totally didn't need that, but Dad loved us and he brought one home. It was one of the greatest days ever. We rode that thing. You know how it was, like a month later, we'd skid it out soft in the driveway. It was like ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. Okay, nobody else, whatever. You guys are boring today. Yeah, you know, you skid so many times you wear out that front tire. Yeah, the joy of childhood. Todd got it. Todd, thank you, Todd, for helping me out on that one. I appreciate it. And Jesus teaches us about a father, a good father who takes care of his children, provides for their needs, provides for their wants every now and then, because that's what good fathers do. And what Jesus does here is he teaches us how to not worry by taking our attention off of ourselves and looking to see how the God of the universe has provided all of our needs. So here's the practical application. When you're worried about the future, because worry is all about what if I don't have enough, what if I won't have enough, I might not have enough. And so I make decisions now based on worries about the future. When you're worried about the future, here's how you do this. You look to the past and you tell yourself the best true story about the future. Because when the Bible talks about God's faithfulness, it regularly says God is faithful, and the reason we know that is look to the past and see all the stories of all the ways that God has provided. And as you look to the past, and you say, I remember that moment right there where God provided, and that is the reminder and the fuel that says, into the unknown future, where I'm a little bit afraid and worried that God might not provide, he provided then, and he provided then, and he will provide in the future. So we're in this phase of like paying for college. And guess what? You know, we did the whole like January comes out, get your taxes done, and you have to get the FAFSA turned in, right? And they've made the FAFSA a lot easier so you don't have to fill it out as much. But, you know, the government did it, and so it was done wrong 3 times and delayed for 8 months. No, I'm serious. Like, this really, really happened. And so they were like, oh, I'm sorry, parents of 2024 freshmen, we don't really know how much money you're going to get or how to do the calculations. It's all in like computer land somewhere while, vendors figure it out. And so we're trying to plan and budget for college. We want to send our daughter to like the private Christian school. We know that tuition's like 40 to 50,000, something like that, and room and board. It's going to be expensive. We don't want to we need to know how much is it going to be. They're like, yeah, I don't know. You're just going to wait. And so we wait and we wait and we wait and we wait. And we had tried to plan, and we looked, we thought, we were just like, what's the number going to be? I just remember the day we got finally we got the financial aid offer in the mail, and we opened it up and we looked at it. And first, of course, we're like, what's the bottom line? And we're like, it's way lower than we thought. There were more scholarships, higher scholarships, more aid, fewer loans than we thought, almost no loans. And we looked, we're like, God has provided again. And we went from fear, which we didn't even really have to have in the moment, but like, God provided. And now the question will be, the next time there's a worry and a fear, will we remember the day the financial aid packet came in the mail, in which God said, see, I'm a good father who takes care of his children. You never saw that grant coming, did you? And we're like, no, we never saw that grant coming. Thank you, Lord. God provides. And one of the reasons we were sitting at Jim Keller's funeral dinner lunch yesterday, and we were sharing that when God blesses us, he gives us details so that we can remember it in the future. See, sometimes we just talk about vague blessings, but vague blessings are quickly and easy to forget. But when God blesses us, he blesses us in specific ways, in specific moments, with details that are hard to forget, so that we can keep telling ourselves that very specific story of what God did in the past to lead us into an unknown future. A father who loves us so much. Jesus keeps on teaching. Verse 27. Consider how the wildflowers grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. And if that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow it's thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And don't set your hearts on what you will eat or drink. Don't worry about it, for the pagan world runs after such things. Your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Now Jesus changes it up a little bit. He says, okay, I've already established we have a good father who takes care of his children. Now I want you to think about the things we run after and the reason that we do. And what Jesus, I think, does here in these verses is that Jesus, he kind of takes head on this myth of security and self-reliance. Verse 28, if that's how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow it's thrown into the fire, how much will he clothe you? And yes, he kind of makes this reference to the wildflowers that they knew were on the hills right as Jesus is teaching. The wildflowers that would bloom for one day and then be gone. That living in the land where they lived, there was not a lot of wood for firewood. And so to bake their bread, they would go out and they would pick the dried, dead wild grass. They would squeeze it and crunch it up, and they would put it into their small ovens, and they would bake their bread with dried grass as the fuel. Jesus says, don't dismiss that grass. And please don't think that you, by your hard work, you went out and you picked that grass, fed the fire, made the dough, worked the bread because you're such a hard worker. Don't you think for a moment that it's all because of you. When you get up in the morning, you start telling yourself that story. I got to get up, and I have to go to work, and I've got to, like that was the main problem last week in the story of the wealthy guy. I. Seems like it's a human problem, not just a wealthy person problem. I. You see, we believe in responsibility, and I believe Jesus supports and believed also in the virtue of responsibility. But the virtue of responsibility can easily grow into the false god of self-reliance, in which I start to tell myself an untrue story that it's all up to me. And when I start to tell myself a story that it's all up to me, it's all up to me, it's all up to me, I begin to chase wealth. I begin to chase experiences. I begin to chase fun. I begin to chase the weekend. I begin to chase after all these things that really aren't all that meaningful because I'm telling myself a story that it's all up to me. And so Jesus, well, he begins to mix the metaphors. Look at verse 32. Do not be afraid, little flock. So he says, Father, but God is more than just a father in heaven. Don't be afraid, little flock. In other words, you're also sheep, and every sheep has a shepherd. He says, for your Father in heaven is not just a Father in heaven, he is also a shepherd who loves and takes care of his flock. Maybe one of the limits of the father metaphor is that children eventually grow up and go on their own, and that's kind of the launching. It's part of the purpose of parenting is to launch them, right? But as children of Father God, there's no launch. We are launched out of the household of God. Like he's always Father, and so maybe Jesus is like we're children of a Father, but we are also the flock of a good shepherd. And the sheep never grow up with a desire to one day go out and become their own. No, they just live under the care of the shepherd their entire lives, just as you and I do, dependent upon the shepherd who takes care of us. And then he gives another metaphor. Look at verse 31. You could run after all these things, but I want to tell you what to seek. Seek his kingdom. Well, if he has a kingdom, then who is he? He is a king. And you and I are citizens and residents of the kingdom under a king. He is a father. He is a shepherd. He is a king. And then look at verse 32. Don't be afraid, little flock, for your Father, who's also a king, has been pleased to give you the kingdom. So you don't have to run after wealth, believing that you have to do everything to take care of yourself because your king, who is your Father, will give you the kingdom. He will take care of you, but he'll give you the kingdom. And if all of this is true, that he is a father who loves his children, he is a shepherd who takes care of his sheep, and you're one of them, and if he is a king who takes care of his subjects, then verse 33, sell your possessions, give to the poor. You can do it. Because no longer we're living in fear. No longer are we letting ourselves just spin out with the story of, I won't have enough, I might not have enough, and it's all up to me. I'm able to just give and to give and to give. And what Jesus does is he says, here's how I want you to think about God. As Father, as Shepherd, and as King. And if that is your view of God, then you'll tell yourselves a better and more true story about yourself and your life and God. And then you'll start spending this stuff as if you really do trust in him. Not in yourself, not in it, not in the government who issues it. But you trust in him, and you become amazingly generous. What Jesus is not suggesting here, just in case you were wondering, he is not suggesting that we shouldn't work hard. He is not suggesting that you should just quit your job and wait for money or food to fall from the sky. He is not suggesting here that it is wrong to save seeds and plant some next year. He's not saying that it's wrong to save for retirement. He's not saying it's wrong to save to have an emergency fund. He's not saying it's wrong to have insurance, okay? What he is saying, though, is that if he's calling you to be a missionary in another country, and it's risky, and you might not have a career, and you're not sure how you're going to pay for everything, that if God calls, he will provide every time. And that financial security is not the most important part of your past, present, or future. Because he is a father. He is a shepherd. He is a king. And you can trust him. And so we give. And as we're directed in Scripture, we give to our church so that our church can continue to minister and serve. And did you know that our church also gives? Just like we ask you to give, our church gives, and that the first more than 10% that we receive, we give it to support missionaries around the world. We give it so that we can have a university with Christian professors who are teaching a Christian worldview and encouraging students to follow Jesus in such a pivotal time in their life. We give. We give locally. Like when you give, a part of your offering goes to support Compassion 360 so that every Thursday afternoon we can open. Wendy told us that, so folks come in on Thursday and they sign in. We only ask for 3 things: your name, the zip code you're in so we can just know who we're serving, and how many people are in your house that you're feeding. The other day, last Thursday, we added up the number of folks in that third column. How many people are you feeding? And it was 296, which is higher than a year ago when we had a room full of toys for Christmas and had our highest ever number. She said, we're seeing those same numbers because food prices are up and people are struggling. And you know what? Most of the people live in Ridgefield. A bunch of the food we get, we share it with Woodlands so that they can share, and they're open on Mondays, I think it is, and serve a whole bunch of other folks as well. And so when you give, you're supporting families who are hungry in Ridgefield, in Woodland, in the surrounding areas. But you know what? Some of you, God is going to invite you to give beyond, to give specifically, and there are a whole bunch of you who give specifically to Compassion 360 so that there are more resources to be shared. And then God sometimes encourages you to give to other missions and causes. And sometimes they are specifically Christian ones, and sometimes they're not necessarily Christian, but that's where God leads you to give. And you just give and you give and you give wherever and however God invites you to give. Someone reminded me last week, too, that, you know what? You also look back to see how God provided, but sometimes we look back and think, you know what? I gave, and I wasn't sure, and I thought I would miss out, but you know what? I gave, and I never missed it. And I'm pretty sure I don't even know what I didn't buy that I would have bought instead of giving. And giving was a whole lot better than whatever it is I forgot about not buying. And then you get to be a part of the blessing. So several years ago, when we were like younger kids and a lot earlier in the build it and pay for it stage of life, just became convicted that I needed to do something personally about poverty in the world, but what and where and how to do it in a responsible way that actually rewards hard work and responsibility, because that is kind of how I think, and heard about an organization that sponsors micro loans to people in developing nations. People like Cecilia, who is 50 years old, has children at home, but she needed a loan of $150 to buy corn to plant and raise. Well, nobody's going to give Cecilia, no bank is going to give Cecilia a loan for $150. It's too small, the amount is too small, and it's too risky. And so some non-governmental organizations come together and provide micro loans in small amounts to Cecilia and others. And heard about an organization that helps fund that. And well, I had sold a guitar and kind of wanted to save the money for someday to buy another guitar, and so it was just sitting in an envelope in my drawer with the word guitar marked on it. And God was like, why don't you just take that, deposit it, and just start loaning it out, and if we ever get around to buying another guitar, well, then you can decide at that point. And so took the money, and Cecilia was one of the first loans that I had the privilege of being a part of. Well, she paid it off. A couple years later, she got another loan and paid that loan off, and I can't remember if I got to be able to part of that one. So when she paid it off, then the organization said, well, she paid it off, your money, now what do you want to do with it? You want to loan it to somebody else? And so over the last 12 years, just continued to loan that measly $300. This week, logged in again and was able to make another loan to well, her name is Soleil. She lives in Rwanda. She started a business on a motorbike where she would deliver and sell and deliver fresh water to people in villages that don't have fresh water. She did so well building the business that now she needs to buy a van so that she can deliver the water. And so I got to be a part of redirecting some money into her loan fund so that Soleil in Rwanda. I looked at the report, and over the last 12 years, that little $300 that I started with has been loaned and reloaned and reloaned and reloaned for a total of $2,451. Now, I am not bragging. So nobody come up and like give me a pat on the back and say, good job, and don't accuse me of bragging. That's just my story. And there's names and real people. And I have wondered, someday I'd love to be able to meet Cecilia and know what she was able to do with crop after crop after crop of corn in her own field. But it's okay if I don't, because I know enough of her story to say I had the privilege of being a part of her story. And that is way better than any guitar I ever could have bought. That's generosity that I've been learning, that Jesus is teaching all of us. Because what he teaches us is, even with this stuff, we can trust him. We can trust him. Worship team, why don't you guys come on back? So Jesus, knowing just how hard it is for us humans to trust, right before he was crucified, he gathered up his disciples for one last meal. And it tells us that as they were having their meal, Jesus took that bread. They were celebrating the Jewish Passover, and so it didn't have any yeast. And he passed the flat bread around, and he said, everybody take a piece of it. But don't let it just be bread. He said, let this bread represent my body, which you will see hanging, broken on a cross in just a short while. And then after supper, he took a cup of wine and he passed it around and he said, as you drink this, let it be more than wine, but let it be my blood, which you will see spilled in a horrible, painful death. But that death you will watch and you will observe has meaning and purpose, because when I die on that cross, I will take your sins and the sins of the rest of the world. Though I have no sins of my own, I will take everybody else's on mine, and I will make atonement. I will make covering. I will pay the price for all of your sins, so that if you trust in me, your sins can be forgiven, your soul can be healed, your shame removed. And you can stop working so hard to prove your value to yourself or to outdo your wrongs with more rights, and you can just rest in trusting me, because you can trust me. And then he said, because I know you're going to struggle to remember, and that humans, we really like things we can touch and hold. How can I trust an invisible God? He said, I want you to take this and I want you to do this regularly. And take little pieces of bread. You don't need much. You just need a little tiny piece as a powerful reminder, because when you take it, I'm going to be there in that bread and all around it and in that moment. And take a little bit of juice and regularly let that bread and let that juice be a powerful reminder. You can trust me. So this morning we're going to celebrate communion together, and then we're going to sing a song that says, I can trust him, I can trust him, I can trust him. And so I invite you to celebrate communion. Hopefully you received a little packet of juice and bread when you came in. If you need one, Grant is right in the back there. Maybe just raise your hand or quickly go back and grab one. Let's all stand together at this time. And as we do, just take that top layer and peel it off and get to the little piece of bread. And then you'll peel off the next layer and get to the juice that's in the cup. We don't require that you be a member of our church or that you get permission from a pastor to celebrate communion. We only ask one thing, and that is that you know that you are trusting in Jesus. Trusting that the sins of your past are forgiven, that brings you into the present. Trusting that your future is taken care of, which brings us into this present moment. Maybe God's been working in your life. And maybe this is your moment to cross the line of faith in a very physical way. Say, Jesus, I receive you into my life. Jesus, I've been scared. I've been worried. I don't know if I can trust you. Jesus, I receive you into my life today. Jesus, come into my life. Forgive my sins. I surrender my life to you. I receive you, Jesus. Fill me with your Spirit, and I'll follow you the rest of my life. And so, Jesus, I just pray that in this moment, would you make your presence known so powerfully. Would you remind every one of us today we can trust you, Jesus? So take that little piece of bread and let it be for you the body of our Lord Jesus Christ that was broken for you. May it preserve you blameless unto everlasting life. Eat this in remembrance that Christ has died for you, and be thankful. Let's eat together. Take that cup. Let it be for you the blood of Christ, which was spilled for you. May it preserve you blameless unto everlasting life. Drink this in remembrance. Christ died for you. Be so thankful. Let's drink together. In these last couple of minutes, prayer team members, I think we have some prayer team members. You guys are ready. We're going to sing a song that says, I trust you, I trust you, I trust you. And even as you're singing that today, if you're like, boy, I'm still really struggling to trust God in some areas of my life, I'd love for a prayer team member to pray with me today. And to pray for God's courage, to pray for God to fill me with trust that is supernaturally divine and only from God. Here we go. Let's just be honest and open to receive all that God has for us. We can pray for you. Prayer team members are here. The band's going to lead us, and let's sing this simple, powerful song that says, God, I trust you, I trust you, I trust you. Let's go out as we proclaim trust and as we ask God for the strength to trust him even more. Here we go. Lead us out of here, guys. Come on, let us pray for you today.